Okay, let's get into the second to last, the penultimate Odyssey video. This will be for chapters 13 through 18. So we're covering a lot of chapters to try to keep moving here. A lot of these chapters towards the end are they kind of feel like, let's get to the point. Why do we need all this extra stuff? Like it just kind of takes its time. It's all build up to whatever I think it's chapter 22 or something like that. The big showdown between Odysseus and the suitors. So I feel your pain if you're like, this is like, let's get to the point. There are a few bloody moments here and there that kind of, keep people satisfied possibly. But anyway, all right, let's go. Book 13, Return of Odysseus. So he's heading home. So King Alcinous has, loved Odysseus's story. He offers to sail him home. Odysseus sleeps the whole time. And this actually ends up really poorly for Alcinous, as you know, because Poseidon gets revenge upon him. We'll talk about that in a second. And then, of course, Athena Minerva reveals to Odysseus, after Odysseus gets home, she reveals herself as like, hey, it's me, like I'm a goddess. I've been helping you the whole time. And they talk for a while. And then we don't know his name in this chapter, but Eumaeus is the swineherd. He's the one taking care of all the pigs. And that's who Athena instructs Odysseus to visit first, right? Just go there, hang out with him, hang low for a little bit, right? Odysseus, of course, is disguised as an old man. So, we got more of the same in this chapter. The gods are bickering as usual. They kind of act very human, just like they always have. Poseidon is complaining to Zeus that, if Odysseus just gets home and the Phaeacians are allowed to help him and sail him home and everything's great, they're going to have no respect for me. I shall no longer be held in any sort of respect among you gods if mortals like the Phaeacians, who are my own flesh and blood, show me such small regard for me. They don't even care. They're allowed to just take this guy home. This guy who killed my son, or didn't kill him. He blinded my son Polyphemus. You're gonna think I'm a joke, right? So I have to be able to punish them, right? And Zeus like, what are you talking about? They're just like, no, well, you're gonna feel this way about me. No, we are gonna respect you. This very human, right? And so ultimately, Zeus says, well, you do what you got to do. You do you, boo, kind of thing, where it's like, hey, you need to destroy the humans, make an example out of someone, go ahead. So he does. He went up to the ship, and the ship is like just returning. Everyone's like waving, like, yay, they're back. This is so great. And all of a sudden, the boat right in front of their eyes turns into a rock and gets squashed into the ground. And they're like, that was weird. Um, he drove it down with the flat of his hand so that it root into the ground. You don't mess with the gods. If somebody is unliked by the gods, don't help them because you'll be destroyed. Right? And he wanted to take the rock and just crush the whole city with it, but he's like, no, I'll just make an example of them. So that's the same as usual. And then the whole helpfulness thing, like Odysseus wouldn't be able to do anything without the help of the gods, right? Did you not know, this is when Athena is talking to Odysseus. Did you not know that Zeus's daughter Athena, me, who have been ever with you, who kept watch over you in all your troubles, and who made the Phaeacians take such a great liking to you? Like, you're the reason. I'm the reason you got home. I'm the reason you're alive, right? I've been taking care of you this entire time, right? So that's very clear in this chapter as well. That's probably about all we can get out of that one. We've got book 14. This is where Odysseus is talking to the swineherd the entire chapter. So we have two characters. Eumaeus is the swineherd. There's quite a bit of dramatic irony because Eumaeus talks about Odysseus quite a bit, right? He's like, oh, Odysseus, right? And Odysseus is literally right there listening to what he's saying. So this brings up some interesting things. So here's an example of some dramatic irony. If my master had grown old here, my master meaning Odysseus, he would have done great things by me, but he is gone, and I wish that Helen's whole race were utterly destroyed, for she has been the death of many a good man. Like, I wish that whole Trojan War thing wouldn't have happened, right? Um, so, you're sitting there reading this going, if my master of Odysseus were just here, and Odysseus is listening to him, and he's like, yeah, if only he were here, huh? And so it adds some humor to the whole thing, right? He says, but the wolves and the birds of prey have long since torn Odysseus to pieces, or the fishes of the sea have eaten him, and his bones are lying buried deep in the sand upon the foreign shore. He is dead and gone. The birds are eating his bones. And Odysseus is like, no, I think my bones are good, dude. So so it's comical because he's right there, right? Also, I think this brings up a really interesting point. Odysseus gets to kind of see what people really think about him. You ever think about what people really think about you, right? Like, what are my friends saying to my other friends behind my back? You ever think about that? So here he actually because people don't know that it's him. So, he gets to see what people really think about him. Eumaeus says, I cannot speak of Odysseus without reverence, though he is here no longer, for he was very fond of me and took such care of me that wherever he may be, I shall always honor his memory. Like, oh, he's such a great guy. And, like, what do students say behind my back? They're like, oh, Kramer, yeah, that guy, oh, he's so unfair. He's so, talks too much, goes on tangents, what he assigns isn't really useful to, whatever, right? Wouldn't it be interesting to really hear all those conversations? Wouldn't it be interesting to, when you're not around, that's when people feel comfortable saying what they really feel. So here it works out because people actually love Odysseus. So Odysseus gets to hear what people really think about him, which is kind of cool. Might not always be that way, right? But it's just something interesting to think about. All right. And then this comes up a few times. I mean, this was in the last chapter too. The second Odysseus gets to shore, and Athena, who's dressed up as someone else, starts talking to him, he starts all these lies and it's like, oh yeah, well, who I really am is this person. And Athena's like, no, why are you lying? Like, the second you open your mouth, just lies come out. Well, that's actually a really interesting question. He says, I am by birth a Cretan. My father was a well-to-do man who had many sons born in marriage, whereas I was the son of a slave who had purchased for a concubine. Nevertheless, my father cast her son. He goes on and on, like details of like the lineage and the family history and all this kind of stuff. And you're like, what is the point? And they go on for pages, some of these. What's the point of all that, right? Well, there's a couple things. And some of it's not totally clear. Like, are they condoning, lies? Is this something that's appropriate? Is okay to do? Well, remember that storytelling is one of the things that is revered by that culture. It's a major form of entertainment. Playing music for people, is telling stories. This would be one of the big, entertainments of a banquet. Is that you'd have the storyteller come out and tell a story for a while. Um, it's like a one-man show, right? So that's one thing, is that he's telling a story. He's making it up on the fly. Is there some moral problem with it? Well, he needs to keep his cover. So he has a legitimate reason to do this, right? He does get chastised by Athena, who says, why are you doing this? But then the second he gets to Eumaeus, he starts lying again. But it's kind of out of necessity, right? So I don't think there's any kind of moral message that the author is trying to send us. I think there's reasons why it's done. You can decide, if it's okay. For the record, Mr. Kramer's not condoning any lying for any reason at all. I'm sure none of you do that. But just as far as the book goes, that's how they treat it. They just kind of like, here's what he said, here's what he said, here's what he said, and then once in a while, Athena gets mad at him. It makes sense that she's mad because it's like, you're lying right to my face. I just caught you. I know who you are, right? But it also makes sense that he lies sometimes because it helps him out, keeps him in disguise. Okay, so that brings us to book 15. Telemachus is finally has finally returned. Athena, commands him to come back. Uh, she guides him, tells him exactly what to do, tells him how to avoid the big ambush that Antinous' men set out. So he heads home. Before he gets on his boat to come home, Theoclymenus shows up, and you might think, well, this is really random. Like, we have one extra person, why do we need this person? He'll come in handy later on. He's going to help out with all the, killing that happens later. But he's on the run for killing a man and asks Telemachus to take him with him so he doesn't have to run in fear all the time. He says, I will be your slave, basically. I'll be a servant to you. Um, and then Eumaeus tells a story to Odysseus about his family. So it's more of the same. Helping people out is important. Theoclymenus says, I am in exile just like you, for I have killed a man of my own race. I'm flying to escape death at their hands, and I'm thus doomed to wander the face of the earth. So help me out, right? So the helping of Theoclymenus, even someone who might be considered immoral, he's not trying to hide from what he did. He's not trying to lie about it. He's like, look, here's what I did. Can you help me out? And he does, and they get rewarded because Theoclymenus helps them later. So there is something to that, right? It may seem a little bit hypocritical because, it's a bad thing that he did, but we don't really know any facts about it. All we know is that he killed someone and now he's being hunted down. We don't know what the purpose or reason was behind the killing. And then, you got to do what the gods say, right? Minerva went to the fair city of Lacedaemon to tell Odysseus, his son, that he was to return at once. And she says, the suitors are lying in wait for you in the strait between Ithaca and Samos. Samos. And they mean to kill you before you can reach home. Sail night and day. Keep your ship well away from the island. So she's really specific about what exactly he needs to do in order to get home. And he follows directions and he gets home safely. So, that lesson is throughout the book, like over and over and over and over again. Listen to the gods. Do what they say, right? And then we talked about the storytelling as informative and entertaining. It'd be entertaining to the people listening to the poem or, reading it. But it's also informative. Eumaeus gives information that would be helpful for Odysseus if he didn't already know who he was. Right? Okay, so let's get on to book 16. This is the Luke, I am your father moment, except it's I am no god, I am your father, right? Because he looks like a god when all of a sudden, he goes from being an old man to all of a sudden he's like this god. And he's like, whoa, only gods can do that. No, it's Odysseus. The god's making him look like that. So, it's basically Odysseus and Telemachus in the hut. And we've talked about this before. The emotions, I wonder if this is about as emotional as things get in the old writing. But these moments that are supposed to be emotional for whatever reason don't always seem so to me. So he says, I'm no God, I'm your father. As he spoke, he kissed his son, and a tear fell from his cheek onto the ground, for he had restrained all tears until now. So this is a very emotional moment. The whole book has been building up to this. He's been trying to get home back to his family for 10 years. And finally we get there, and this is what as emotional as it gets. It's not a ton of description. It's a little bit of tears. Is that an emotional payoff? As it should be. This should be a huge emotional payoff where it's like, it's a part of the movie where they're finally reunited and we're crying in the seats and everything. Does it work? I don't know. You tell me. As he spoke, he sat down, and Telemachus threw his arms around his father and wept. They were both so much moved that they cried aloud like eagles or vultures. Did birds even cry? With crooked talons that had been robbed of their half-fledged young by peasants. Thus piteously did they weep, and the sun would have gone down upon their mourning if Telemachus had not suddenly said, and then they move on. So maybe is that part of the problem, that it just moves on so quickly, doesn't spend a lot of time with it? Is it that there's not a lot of description? It's just very matter of fact. Here's what they did, here's what they did, here's what they did, and there's no like, here's what he felt, and there's no details about his emotions or what happens to his body as a result of his emotions. He's quivering or shaking, or he just cries. Or am I just a rock and I don't have any emotions and I'm not moved by this and I really should be? Maybe. Okay, so that brings us to book 17. There's a lot going on. There's so many characters. There's so many different things that happen. Same thing with book 18. This is where it seems like, why does all this stuff need to happen? Can we just get to the suitors and the revenge upon the suitors? But okay, Telemachus returns to his house. Odysseus is going to return as well. Euryclea welcomes Telemachus home. She's only in it for a second. Remember, she's the one that has taken care of Telemachus. Penelope meets her son again. She is overwhelmed with emotion. She's glad to see him, but she's also kind of, like, hey, why didn't you tell me that you were going to leave and all this kind of stuff. This lighting seems a little bit low. Is that better? Oh, that's about as high as it. I think I'm running out of battery. All right. So Telemachus returns to the house. It's really bothering me. How's that? Too much? That seems good. All right. Where was I? This is a professional video. Penelope meets. Theoclymenus tells Penelope that Odysseus is in town. He's going to do more later on, but that's what he's got right now. And then we have Melanthius. Melanthius, yeah, who verbally abuses Odysseus and Eumaeus. He's just some guy hanging out like at a fountain, and he's like, "You guys are just, I don't like you." I don't remember exactly what he says. Yeah, that's okay. I'm gonna charge this. I'll charge it. Yeah, we're good. We'll get to Odysseus' old dog, Argos. And then Antinous and Eumaeus, the suitors, they haven't changed much. They're still acting the same way that they always have. Okay, so let's get back to the question of emotionality. Is that a word? Because there is one place in this book where I actually get probably more emotional than any other part, but I don't think it was on purpose. So it's not this part. So this is kind of the same as before. So Penelope comes out, she sees her son again. It should be pretty emotional. Penelope came out of her room looking like Diana or Venus and wept as she flung her arms about her son. She kissed his forehead and both his beautiful eyes. "Light of my eyes," she cried as she spoke fondly to him. "So you are come home again. I made sure I was never going to see you anymore. To think of you having gone off to Pylos without saying anything about it or obtaining my consent. But come, tell me what you saw." And then, he responds, "Do not scold me, mother," answered Telemachus, "nor vex me, seeing what a narrow escape I have had. But wash your face, change your dress, go upstairs with your maids." Maybe that's why this doesn't resonate emotionally, because it's almost like they're about to have a really emotional moment. She's like, "Oh, my son, I care about you, tell me about it." And he's like, "Nah, go upstairs, go inside, I don't care." I mean, he doesn't say "I don't care," but it kind of feels that way. So and I don't think that's necessarily done on purpose to like cut off the emotions, but it just doesn't sink in probably as much as it should. The one moment that I personally get, feel something in my heart of stone is when we get to Argos. Okay, as they were thus talking, a dog that had been lying asleep raised his head and pricked up his ears. This was Argos, whom Odysseus had bred before setting out for Troy. As soon as he saw Odysseus standing there, he drooped his ears and wagged his tail, but he could not get close up to his master. And then a few paragraphs later, as Eumaeus spoke, he went inside the buildings to the cloister where the suitors were, but Argos died as soon as he recognized his master. That is so heartbreaking. This poor dog. I mean, it's been 10 years, so he must have been a puppy when Odysseus left, and he's been waiting 10 years, and he finally is like, oh, and his tail's wagging, and he's like, and he's so excited that he's a heart attack and dies because he's an old dog. And I don't think it's just trying to be emotional on purpose. It might even be an attempt at humor. I hope not. But I think it's just because puppies and dogs are so amazing and we just love them that when someone's like a dog died, you're like, oh, So I don't know. This is just my opinion. I'm not trying to tell you if you should feel emotional or not. Maybe you read that and you're like, oh man, I was in tears when the mom, saw her son again. But all right. Have you noticed how many horrible people are in this book? There's a lot of horrible people. Here, Melanthius, son of Dolius, overtook them as he was driving down some goats. When he saw Eumaeus and Odysseus, he reviled them with outrageous and unseemly language, which made Odysseus very angry. On this, as he passed, he gave Odysseus a kick on the hip out of pure wantonness. I just feel like kicking you. Bam! He's saying all these horrible things. What is wrong with people? We'll get back to that in a second. And then we have Antinous, which is even worse. He's yelling at Odysseus, who looks like an old man. What god can have sent such pestilence to plague us during our dinner? Get out to the open part of the court. Like, you just smelly and stinky. Get out of here, right? And Odysseus says, your looks, fine sir, are better than your breeding. And that really makes Antinous mad. So he throws a stool at him. This made Antinous very angry, and he scowled at him, saying, you shall pay for this before you get clear of the court. With these words, he threw a footstool at him and hit him on the right shoulder blade near the top of his back. Let's pause for a second. You're telling me somebody just says, hey, you're kind of rude, and you throw a stool at him? And by the way, this is an old man who's like barely moving around. He's like a cane or something. He's throwing things at the guy. Now, what's awesome is, of course, this is really Odysseus, so he doesn't even flinch. Like, he doesn't even, it's boom, and doesn't even move him at all. Odysseus stood firm as a rock, and the blow did not even stagger him, but he shook his head in silence as he brooded on his revenge. So this is kind of an awesome, moment. This is like an action hero moment where like the stool explodes and he just goes, which is cool. But like, so why do this? There needs to be a distinction between the good guys and the bad guys. And in these really old timey stories, it's very clear. The good guys may do some things that we don't necessarily think is very heroic in our current context, but it's very, very clear nonetheless who the heroes are and who the villains are. There's no separation between the two. Nowadays, you have like Thanos, who has this kind of reason for doing what he does, and his backstories, and there's like, oh, I was hurt as a kid, so therefore I'm evil now, and you're like, oh, I kind of understand that. Not here. Like, evil people are evil and the good people are good, and never the two shall meet, kind of thing. Okay, here's what I picture when I picture that scene.
Yes. Okay, be careful, sweet, sweet treasure.
God, I missed you, Lulu.
Chase, it's only been 3 hours.
Who's Chase? Oh, that's Mom's new boyfriend. Hey, I know you from American Gladiators. You're Pyro.
Only on weekends. During the week, I'm just your average workaday stuntman.
Really?
Go ahead, break a chair on me.
Here we go. I mean, even that guy flinched a little bit.
Okay, boys, I gotta go. Come on, Lulu, let's roll.
I wonder if this will happen with Homer too.
What the hell is wrong with you?
Gee, sorry. It's a pretty standard stunt, Homer. Homer, get ready!
For what?
Oh, I can't even. Anyway, so that's what I picture. Pretty classic. All right. Enough of those shenanigans. Mr. Kramer, this is already an hour video. Can we move on? Hey, where's my face? Where's my face? Hello, face. All right. A lot of stuff going on in chapter 18. Iris fights the old man. That's a brutal fight, and we'll get back to that. Just warning, there's going to be some graphic, words. So put on mute if you don't want to hear that stuff. We have Amphinomus, the nice suitor. So we'll get to him. Penelope asks for presents from the suitor. She's like, hey, the common thing is for you to. Oh, wow, that's really bright. It's charged. Good enough. The common thing is for if you really want to marry someone to, give her presents. So give me some presents. So they literally go home or go out and get her dresses and bring them back. Melantho is only in this for a second. She's an ungrateful maid. It talks about how she was brought up by Penelope, but she just doesn't care, and she's like doing bad things with the suitors. And just remember that, because the maids get their comeuppance too, like pretty brutally. And then Eurymachus, Athena really is trying to make Odysseus angry. So even when some of the suitors are trying to like be nice and they feel like they should be nice to him, Athena's like, nope, you're going to be a mean person. And then she literally makes them be mean. So she makes Eurymachus say all these horrible, mean things to Odysseus, which makes him even madder, which makes him want to kill them even more. Okay, so let's get into the Irish fight. Again, if you're sensitive to like the bloody words and stuff, don't read this part. So it says, Odysseus deemed it best to give a lighter blow for fear of the Achaeans. By the way, Iris is a homeless person, right? Like a beggar. And the suitors want to see them fight. You have these two old men that are fighting. And it's just, if you find that entertaining to see two old homeless people fight, then there's something wrong with you, right? And it's brutal. It's brutal. So Odysseus is like, look, yeah, I look like an old man, but I'm actually Odysseus. So if I actually punch him as hard as I can, he'll probably like his head will fly off, right? So he thought that, oh, it'd be best to give a lighter blow for fear that not to help Iris and to not kill him, but he's afraid that the Achaeans would begin to suspect who he was. Like, wait a second. I mean, maybe the chair exploding on him and him not even moving wasn't a good enough clue, but okay. Then they began to fight, and Iris hit Odysseus on the right shoulder. But Odysseus gave Iris a blow on the neck, under the ear, that broke in the bones of his skull, and the blood came gushing out of his mouth. Like, that is an old man. That is brutal. He fell groaning in the dust, gnashing his teeth and kicking on the ground. But the suitors threw up their hands and nearly died of laughter. So why be so brutal about this? Okay, well, let's not forget that this is a poem, and I don't know, I think these first two go together. Like, I'm not saying that this is reality and this is the kind of thing that happened, like all these things happened, but writers write what they know. So it was a brutal time back then. And this sort of interaction would have been entertaining to the people of the time. It's an action flick, right? And these action-y things are happening. So, that's one thing. But there is also, I think, other important things going on here. One, it reminds us of Odysseus' strength. Up to this point, we haven't seen him do much. I mean, it's been since maybe the Cyclops situation where he really showed this big, courage and strength. For the last bunch of chapters, he's kind of been hanging out and looking like an old person. So I think this reminds us, oh yeah, he could do some serious damage. Like, this guy is super heroic, right? So I think that's not a bad thing for the author to do here. And then it also, because of how the suitors react to this horrible thing going on, they're laughing. I think it's so hilarious. They nearly died of laughter. It reminds us of how awful they are, and it makes us feel good about to get their comeuppance. It's prepping us for like all the horrible things that will happen to the suitors. And then finally, we need to talk about Amphinomus for just a second. He took out two. So he's kind of the nice suitor. He is doing some nice things. He brings bread. None of the other suitors have done that. So he brought bread over to Odysseus, and he said, good luck to you, Father Stranger. You're badly off at the present, but I hope you will have better times by and by. And to which Odysseus responds, Amphinomus, you seem to be a man of good understanding. And he walked away serious and bowing his head. So he really, felt bad. But because he foreboded evil, he's like, it's a bad situation. Like, I don't like what's going on here. But even so, he did not escape destruction, for Minerva had doomed him to fall by the hand of Telemachus. So we know he's going to die. Okay. And you're like, "Aw, poor Amphinomus. Like, he's a good guy." Well, first of all, there's a lesson here, and I don't call this a theme because this isn't something we can really learn from because the Greek mythology gods aren't real. But a person's fate is in the hands of the god. That's the gods. That's the lesson that they were trying to get across. So this real, like, it doesn't matter what kind of person you are, what you do. If the gods decide you're toast, you're toast. That's just the way it is. But also, being nice once in a while isn't good enough, right? He's still there. He's still eating up their food. He's still, he doesn't. If he had walked away at that moment, okay, maybe it's a different story. But he's like, "Oh, I feel bad because bad things are going to happen." Well, then leave, right? So if you're going to be spared by the gods, you got to be uninvolved. You can't help someone who the gods don't like. You can't, take any part in anything. So there you go. Let me check to see. Okay, which lighting's better? That one? That one gives more of a shadow. What if I do? Ooh, that really shows my face a little better, huh? So interesting. All these new gadgets. It's too bad I'm done filming and I don't need them anymore. Okay, well, we made it through that. Hey, one more. Yes. Almost last one. I will try to get it out by Monday. It might be Tuesday, but and then that will be all she wrote. So thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.